From WKYC Studios and 3 News Investigates, this is Bomb City, USA, with your host, investigator Rachel Polansky.
Few turn on the mafia and live to tell the tale. In Cleveland, Ohio, those who did were usually silenced, often with deadly car bombs. Just listen to my TV station, 3 News, report on Cleveland's underworld in the 1970s.
Over the years, our cameras have covered the mob battles. In 1974, underworld figure Alex Shonder Burns was bombed to death as he got into his car in a parking lot. Another mob bombing in 1977, Teamster Union official John Nardi was apparently trying to muscle in on the organized crime action. 5 months later, Danny Green, also challenging the mob leadership, blown up in a parking lot in Lyndhurst.
In episode 1, we talked about the rise and fall of the Irishman, Danny Green. Now let's take a closer look at the man who killed him.
Well, to me, it was like having a glass of wine. It didn't mean a thing to me. I killed him, and there was no remorse.
Plus, a Cleveland mafia boss testifies about the organization's dirty secrets, and it leads to the takedown of 5 New York godfathers. We have the first and only interview with the FBI agent who convinced him to flip.
He testified against the 5 bosses. The 5 bosses went to jail, and his testimony was crucial because he showed that this was an enterprise.
My name is Rachel Polansky. I'm an investigative reporter at WKYC Studios in Cleveland, Ohio, and this is Bomb City, USA. A true story about organized crime, murder, and a fight for control that left everyone dead or behind bars. This is episode 2, The Men Who Flip.
I killed him, and there was no remorse.
Cold as ice. That's Ray Ferrito talking to a reporter in 1984. Ferrito is clean-shaven, with gray hair and bushy eyebrows, wearing a gray suit with the matching tie.
A man with a conscience doesn't last too long on the streets.
After several failed attempts to kill Danny Green, the Cleveland Mafia, headed by James Jack White Licavoli, bring him in. At the time, he's a California gangster who had just carried out a murder for the LA crime family.
While I was in California, a problem arose with a man who was giving many people problems and bringing a lot of heat by the law enforcement agencies to other people. I took care of that problem by taking him out to the airport and shooting him in the head.
And Ferrito is a killer with ambition. He wants to join the Cleveland crime family, and he says the bosses agree to make him a member if he kills the Irishman. Ferrito and his partner, Ron the Crab Carabia, work on the Danny Green murder for over a year. Eventually, they tap his landline.
I got a key to an apartment in the building. While in the building, we went down into the manager's office and found his lines and tapped the phone and hooked it up to the dead phone that was in the apartment where we were living.
And so they would listen to Green make a dentist appointment for the following Thursday. And when he showed up on that overcast October day, they were waiting for him. Earlier that morning, Ferrito and Carabia had assembled a bomb and placed it inside an iron box that was welded into a Chevy Nova. That would be the bomb car that Carabia would drive to the dentist's office, while Ferrito would drive a 1973 Plymouth. That would be the getaway car. Once Green walks inside the dentist's office, it's go time. Ferrito gets into the Nova and parks it in the spot next to Green's car. Then he rejoins Carabia. They drive to a nearby phone booth where they can still see the parking lot. And when the Irishman approaches his emerald green car, Carabia pulls the trigger on a remote-controlled device, detonating the bomb. The sky erupts, bright orange, and after many failed attempts, Danny Green is ripped apart.
wasn't elated because I killed someone. I was elated because the job was done and I was going to become one of them and share in the profits. Something that, since I was a kid, I dreamed of.
But Ferrito would not achieve that dream. In a twist of fate, he killed the Irishman only to be brought down himself, not with a bullet or a bomb, but rather a pencil in the hand of a sketch artist. As Ferrito drove away from Green's death, she followed him. And then she did what artists do. She drew a picture.
She's got a lot of guts, this girl. She pulls up alongside the getaway car, and looks at him and then just falls back. And then she sketches, I showed you that sketch, she sketched Ferrito driving that car. Now her father was a police officer at Berea. So she takes that sketch to her father. Her father goes downtown to Cleveland Intelligence and gives that sketch to Andy Vanyo. Andy Vanyo looks at that sketch and says, that's Ray Ferrito. That's how he did it.
I go back to retired FBI agent Bob Frederick's house for this part of the story, as he's the agent who was working the case.
Talk about coincidence. Right on his front seat of his car was a Cleveland magazine open to a picture of Green circled. And then we pulled down the visor. Joe Wiegis and I, Joe Wiegis said, we've hit the mother lode. And he pulls down the visor and out pops the registration for the car too.
Ferrito was arrested. 2 weeks later, stewing in a jail cell, he felt abandoned by his mafia family, who did not hire him a lawyer. So he called the FBI, and Frederick paid him a visit. So you were the first FBI agent to interview him after the Danny Green.
Myself and Tom Kimmel.
I asked him to walk me through that interview.
He kept building up the story of how they orchestrated the killing of Green. And when it was all over, then he said that we were in the parking lot there and then told us how they killed him. And then we drove off. We got out of the interview where we took a break, and Tom said, I mean, he didn't show one emotion all the way up to and including killing Green.
I was taken aback by that.
Mm-hmm. Well, so were we.
Ferrito goes on to tell Frederick that he has knowledge that could implicate most of the Cleveland family in the murder of Danny Green. He says he'll plead guilty and testify against the family if the FBI will make him a deal. The next day, Frederick gets approval from headquarters, and Ferrito is moved to a safe house. Ray Ferrito talking to you guys here would lead to a flurry of indictments against some of the most notorious mafia figures. Like, this was the beginning.
Yeah, the beginning. Mm-hmm. Yeah, from that point on, we started indicting people.
Since the FBI had federal and county charges filed against Licavoli and his crew, they had to decide who they would charge first and with what. They went with the local murder case first, and the trial began in February 1978.
But Licavoli was as tough as they come. He was as tough as they come. I had a lot of respect for him.
That's the voice of James Willis. He's in his 90s now, and he looks his age, with wrinkles around his eyes and a gray beard. But his mind is as sharp as it was in the 1970s, when he was an attorney defending the mobsters.
After Danny Green got blown up, I was representing, again, Pasquale Sisternino. And I'll always remember I was in Puerto Rico, and I got a phone call from Frank Leonardo, who was Angelo Leonardo's brother. And I asked him first thing, I said, how the hell you find me down here in Puerto Rico? And he told me to forget about it. And he asked me, was I going to be in my hotel room that evening at 6 o'clock? I said, should I be in my hotel room at 6 o'clock? He said, yes, you should be in your hotel room at 6 o'clock. So at 6 o'clock, somebody came, called me, and so he came up and talked to me, and he indicated, he said, listen, we want you to represent the old man. I said, who's the old man? He said, Jack Licavoli. I said, I'm already in that case. I'm representing Pasquale Sisternino. They called him Butchie. He says, we know all about it. As a matter of fact, Butchie, that's what they called him, wants you to represent the old man. I said, well, I'll have to take that up with him. He said, fair enough.
And that was the beginning of Willis's friendship with the old man, James Jack White Licavoli.
Well, when I got back to Cleveland, I had promised that I would go see him. And when I went up to see him, he was in a room, and there were like 4 or 5 of them in a room. I was very interesting. All these guys were all in the same room. I said, damn, this is real life here. And so Sister Nino, when I went in the room, he walked up to me and said, come over here, I want you to meet the old man. There was a bunch of them sitting at a table playing cards. Everybody got up and moved away. And he introduced me to Licavoli.
Just like that, Willis became Licavoli's attorney, and he asked him the same question that he asks all of his clients.
So I asked him, I said, oh, incidentally, what is your defense? And his answer was very interesting. He said, you're the lawyer, you tell me. That's just the way he put it. He said, you're the lawyer, you tell me.
The verdict was reached 3 months later. The jury convicted Pascal Butchie's sister Nino and Ron the Crab Carabia, and they were sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms. But the boss, James Jack White Licavoli, was acquitted, free to walk right out of the courtroom.
But it was a good trial. It was one of the best trials that I've ever conducted. But it had a lot of complications in it. And I must have examined at least 30 to 40 FBI agents. That's how many FBI agents were involved in this prosecution. And with Frito, who was actually the killer and was the informant, I thought I made a lot of hay with him as well. And it was a not guilty plea.
Good news for James Willis.
Yeah, it didn't go well at all.
Bad news for Bob Frederick, who says they got the soldiers, but they missed the generals.
I think what was going through our minds is, what did we do wrong? Why couldn't we convince a jury of this?
And so Licavoli had free reign over Cleveland again, but it would not last. He'd eventually face federal RICO murder charges in June 1982, almost 5 years after Danny Green was killed. James Willis would defend Licavoli again. He tells me about the day a plea deal was offered.
He said, I said, they said they'll give you 7 years and give everybody else 2 or 3 years if you plead guilty. He said, Jimmy, said, we're gonna be friends for a long time, provided you don't come to me with no more goddamn deals. He said, if I'm going down with the ship. That's what he told me.
And this time he would go down with the ship. A verdict was reached a month later. Licavoli was found guilty of 2 counts of RICO murder and sentenced to 17 years.
That was an injustice.
After that, Licavoli and his crew were sent to Cleveland's Cuyahoga County Jail, where Bob Frederick says they made themselves right at home.
They had big feasts there in the county, yeah. Yeah, they were. They brought in food. They brought in Italian food from the Italian neighborhood there.
That's right. They ordered special food from Murray Hill, Cleveland's Little Italy. And if you're thinking, wait a second, didn't that happen in the movie Goodfellas? Yes, it did.
So did Goodfellas copy that?
Yeah, they must have copied it. Oh my, you can't make this stuff up, man.
Eventually, all of the convicted mobsters were sent to federal prison, but one Cleveland Mafia member remained untouchable.
We did it. We finally got what we wanted, but we didn't get Angelo.
Angelo Big Ange Leonardo was named acting boss of the Cleveland Mafia when Licavoli went to prison, and he had a long history with the Cleveland Mafia. In episode 1, I told you the Cleveland Mafia was born when the 4 Leonardo brothers and the 7 Perello brothers joined forces. Angelo's father, Joe, was the first boss, and when Joe was killed by his second-in-command in the 1920s, Angelo, who was only a teenager at the time, retaliated by killing his father's murderer.
They were supervised by the family's second-in-command, Angelo Leonardo. He's the only leading member of the family not charged and convicted for the murder of Danny Green.
Big Ange led the family for another 2 years, until he too was arrested on RICO murder and drug charges.
Then they assigned this case to their youngest and most inexperienced prosecutor, Donna Fitzsimmons. Okay? And little did they know that she's a tiger.
That young federal prosecutor, Donna Congeni Fitzsimmons, is now a 70-year-old municipal court judge in Rocky River, Ohio, a suburb on the west side of Cleveland. She's petite, about 5 feet tall, maybe 100 pounds. She has short brown hair and she's carrying a brown file folder when I walk into her courtroom.
This is all from the 70s and 80s, all these documents.
Yeah, these are from
Why did you save it?
Because it's meaningful to me, incredibly meaningful to me that I was able to do this.
At the young age of 28, Congeni Fitzsimmons would shatter glass ceilings by taking on mafia kingpin Angelo Leonardo. So how did this case end up in her hands?
I believe that my supervisors did not feel this case was going to go anywhere. The guy was the head of this office did not think this case was going to ever be successful.
Neither did her opposing counsel. She pulls out a newspaper clipping that's dated February 6, 1983. It says, quote, "Naive lawyerette beats the rap and the mob."
Naive lawyerette.
Lawyerette.
That's what he called me. Yeah, 3 times.
She wouldn't just face sexism. She'd also receive a death threat. But all of this would only fuel her.
We had so much evidence, and you just had to be methodical and know it all better than anybody else, and that's basically what we had going for us. We knew it. I knew it. I knew it like I knew my name, and because I'd been involved in the beginning, I knew every twist and turn of how this case came about.
Her star witness was mobster Carmen Zagaria. He ran gambling and drug rings for the Cleveland family, and his narcotics network was considered the largest in Northeast Ohio.
The Carmen thing was the big break because he was a great witness, and we had the supporting corroboration evidence that made everything that he said we could prove was true.
Zagaria was on the stand for 4 days. My TV station 3 News covered the compelling testimony.
According to Zagaria, he and defendants Kevin McTaggart, Hans Grau, and Joseph Gallo were partners. So was another man, Billy Bostic, who Zagaria testified stole some of the profits. In June of 1980, while Bostic was walking down the stairs of Zagaria's West Side pet store, Zagaria says McTaggart shot him twice in the head. When he went down to look, Zagaria told jurors, Hans in his right hand had this cleaver, and he was chopping at Bostic's left hand.
Zagaria was able to link the family to the drugs, and Congeni Fitzsimmons says it's around this time that she finally starts feeling confident.
Because I know all the ways we can corroborate him. Number one, he's going to take us to the bodies. We're going to now have bodies and evidence. Sanito, Gallo, they really never talked to the other people, very rarely, but they talked to him regularly. We knew that from our. So Carmen's the middleman. Carmen's the best one that could be a witness because he ran the day-to-day operations of the narcotics, and he did most of the murders, or knew exactly who did it or how they happened.
And he was good in court.
And he was very good in court. He was excellent in court.
And in January 1983, she nails her landing with a sweeping verdict.
The Cleveland mob's second-in-command, Angelo Leonardo, guilty. Joe Gallo, his lieutenant, guilty. Kevin McTaggart, guilty. Hans Grau, guilty.
They were all found guilty. I found an old interview with Congeni Fitzsimmons just outside the courthouse.
We're very pleased by the results, and we really had a great jury. They were very conscientious, and we think the result was justified by the evidence.
What is going through your mind? Like, especially, all the cards were against you, like people didn't have confidence in you, and holy cow, like this moment, what is this like for you?
It was unbelievable. I was sitting there, so I have my legal pad, and I just had each of their names. And so when I hear, and I have actually my note where I write GGG, guilty, 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 for the other names, I knew it was going to come. The whole thing was going to come because it showed the jury believed the story. The jury believed that this organization came together to commit murders, do drugs, and take over, all the crime in the area, take that over and be the enterprise.
And what happened in that Cleveland courtroom would have a significant impact on organized crime in Cleveland and across the United States. Facing a lifelong prison sentence, the aging Leonardo was ready to cut a deal. And Bob Frederick was there to offer one.
I talked to him about a half an hour. We just talked about what was going on in Cleveland, okay? And I said, Angelo, let's face it, you got 103 years. You can't do 103 years. He said, I know. Okay? I said, look, and then I gave him my business card, and I said, if you ever need a favor, give me a call. I think we can work something out for you. I just thought that was the guy we needed because he could do a lot more. And then I gave him my business card, and I said, if you ever need a favor, give me a call. I think we can work something out for you.
Big Ange called a week later.
He said, I think I want to do business with you guys. I told my boss, he was ecstatic. And then the two of us, my boss and I, went and told the strike force, senior strike force attorney. And once we got finished with our presentation, he said, what can he do for Cleveland? And I said, Steve, he can't do anything for Cleveland. He said, well, I don't want him. Okay, so I stewed over that for a while. And then I said to my boss, I said, Joe, I'm going over to see Judge Manos. Come with me because you're good friends with him. We're going to have to backdoor these guys.
Now another young prosecutor was about to win instant fame. That man was Rudy Giuliani. He was prepping for a big trial in which he was going after the 5 families of New York.
These are extremely dangerous individuals. They are people who have destroyed the lives of other human beings.
And Frederick was thinking that Big Ange could be Giuliani's star witness.
And Angelo can testify against all of those guys. Angelo doesn't know what they're doing, but he can make the association in fact or the enterprise. In the RICO case, the enterprise has to be at least an association in fact. It can be a company, but it also can be an association in fact. So Angelo can say these guys are an organized group. So he can make the RICO case, and he can come in here and say, every one of these guys that I see sitting there are made members in the family, because I've met them all, and I'm a made member.
A few months later, Leonardo, hidden behind a screen to shield his face, became the first sitting mafia boss and the highest-ranking mobster to flip.
My name is Angelo Leonardo. I'm 77 years old. I'm a member of La Cosa Nostra. I'm a former underboss of the Cleveland organized crime family. I became a member of La Cosa Nostra in the late 1940s. I've been associated with the organization since the late 1920s. When I was made or became member of La Cosa Nostra, I went through an initiation ceremony. I was invited into the room at the Statler Hotel in Cleveland. They explained to me that I have been proposed to be a member of La Cosa Nostra and define the rules and regulation of the organizations. They told me that you cannot fool around with narcotics. You cannot fool around with a woman that's married to a member of La Cosa Nostra. And that whatever illegal activity you engage in, you have to report to the boss and receive permission to engage in that activity. Once you accept the rules of membership, they lift the cloth off a table. Underneath is a gun and a dagger. You are told that you now live and die by the dagger and the gun. You are given a card with a picture of a saint on it. The card is placed in the palm of your hands and lit. You shake the burning card back and forth until it's burned down to ashes. Then they pinch your finger to draw blood. And then everyone kisses you on the cheek and says, you are a member now.
Leonardo would go on to reveal details of the Midwest mob skimming of Las Vegas casinos, like the Desert Inn and the Stardust.
Kansas City will get the money from Las Vegas and cut it up between themselves, Cleveland and Milwaukee. The Cleveland family received a total of $40,000 a month from the skim. To the best of my knowledge, the scheme continued until at least 1984.
He would also expose the inner workings of the mafia's politics.
Since the 1920s, my family has reported to a Genovese family in New York City. I traveled to New York on several occasions to discuss family business. In 1976, I went to New York to talk to Salerno to obtain his help on murdering Danny Green.
His testimony spanned several empires, from Ohio to New York to Chicago. And when it was all over, the mobster defendants were convicted in a 21-count indictment, made to serve sentences of 40 to 100 years, a crippling blow to the decades-old New York mafia. Meanwhile, Lenardo's prison term was reduced from life plus a century to just under 2 years.
Do you ever have any, do you feel any guilt about that?
No.
Or was it worth it?
It was worth it. I mean, we took out a lot of people, or he did. I mean, with these cases all over the country. He testified against the 5 bosses. The 5 bosses went to jail, and his testimony was crucial because he showed that this was an enterprise.
Frederick points to a framed picture hanging on his wall. I walk closer. I see it's a sketch from the trial. Angelo is facing the courtroom testifying, and the 5 New York bosses are sitting, stone-faced. There is a note written on the bottom left of the sketch in black Sharpie. I ask him to read it.
Under your command, the family was clipped. Angelo signed that.
The family was clipped, and Lenardo went into the Federal Witness Protection Program. He did eventually return to Cleveland some years later, where he lived out his final years quietly, dying in his sleep at the age of 95. Coming up next time on Bomb City, USA. They pulled off one of the biggest bank burglaries of our time.
Cash and diamonds and gold. One bag was so big it looked like Santa Claus coming walking up the hill.
Stealing millions of dollars that was rumored to belong to former President Richard Nixon.
I really didn't believe it at first, but coming from a source like Jimmy Hoffa, who got around good and head of the Teamsters, and he was friends with the mafia.
And they almost got away with it.
One of the downfalls started right at the beginning.
That part of the story next time on Bomb City, USA. This has been a production of WKYC Studios, reported and hosted by me, Rachel Polansky, produced by Phil Trexler, and edited by Gianni Catalano. Our digital director is Denise Pulverine. Our digital producer is Megan Hambaugh, and our archival researcher is Matt Hine. Special thanks to Mickey Burns, Adam Miller, John Atkins, Susan Moses, Mike Leonard, Barbara Polansky, and Michelino Covada for his narration of Angelo Lenardo.
Thanks for listening to Bomb City, USA with Rachel Polansky from WKYC Studios. Subscribe now so you never miss an update, and find more on WKYC.com and the WKYC app.